Chapter 11, okay? So why don't you try to find in all of those papers that I gave you, your, wherever it is, why don't we start with the outline? Okay? Kingdoms of Persia and Greece, because it really gets kind of arduous, all of the terminology and all of the stuff that happens, but I'm gonna, again, my burden has been to understand it in a simple way. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the first 4 verses of chapter 11. And I'm out of the New King James. Okay, first 4 verses. And it says, well, let's start with verse 21 of chapter 10 just to kind of flow into it. Verse 20, then he said, do you know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come. Yeah, sorry, I started in 20, verse 20. And so he says, with the prince of Persia, and when I've gone forth, indeed, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. That's the archangel Michael, your prince, meaning Michael is associated with Israel. Okay. All right. So now we're in chapter 11. Also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Okay, verse 2. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these. Okay, so part 1 of this vision was what I just said, last week's lesson. Part 2, information is now being given about a conflict between the kings of the north and the kings of the south. That's what any commentary that you go look at, it's the kings of the north and the kings of the south, chapter 11. That's what you hear. Kings of the north, kings of the south. And it's like, wow, because we're thinking about the statue, we're thinking about all these beasts and everything. Now we've got a whole other thing, the kings of the north, kings of the south, right? Part 3, chapter 12, gives information about the willful king and the time of the end. We'll get into it maybe a little bit tonight, possibly not, and that brings us through the end of chapter 12. Okay, now, Gabriel is telling Daniel in what we just read the truth about the world kingdoms. Daniel at this time has seen Babylon fall. He is part of the Medes and Persia kingdom, okay? And now he finds out that 3 more kings are to rise in Persia after Cyrus, okay? The 4th would exceed all others in wealth, and because of that, he would stir up trouble against Greece. And here, prophecy is really for us history being documented in advance, but we know our history, and that's what we're going to study a lot, is our history, okay? Now, those 4 kings, all right? We know about the first Cyrus. Then there was Cyrus called False Smerdis. He was an imposter. He claimed the throne for only 7 months. And then there was this other guy named Darius the Great. You don't have to write these down. I'm just giving you the 4. And then the final king, the 4th king, was Xerxes. You guys know the story of Esther? Mm-hmm. She ended up married to Xerxes, okay? That king was wealthy and self-confident, okay? He amassed an army of 1 million men and a navy of 1,200 ships. And you know what he did? He went and declared war on Greece. And he suffered a humiliating defeat. He never recovered. Therefore, what we just read history fulfills the prophetic word of that verse, okay? So it didn't work, all right? So that was the kings of Persia under letter A there that I just gave you. Now, let's talk about verse 3. It says, it speaks of a mighty king standing and doing his will when the kingdom of Greece comes to power. Now, who is that king? Alexander the Great, okay? He stood up as king. He had great dominion, and certainly, I'm just going to call him Alex, okay? Alex definitely did as he wanted, all right? Now, Alex, or Alexander the Great, is, if you remember, he is represented as the notable horn of that goat that came running and charging and overpowering the ram that was represented by the Persians in the ram and goat vision of Daniel chapter 8, okay? And Alex conquered the then known world. In 12 years, he conquered all Asia, all the way to the borders of India. And he also completely subjugated the whole entire Medo-Persian kingdom. And it's recorded about Alexander the Great that he sat down and wept because there were no more kingdoms to conquer. And at 33 years old, he died suddenly from utter and total debauchery, okay? And so now on this side of history, we see that the prophetic word declared to Daniel, okay, that at the height of the power of the kingdom of Greece, that it would be broken and divided into the four winds of heaven. And certainly Alexander the Great at 33 years old, that's his height. That's certainly his height of power. The kingdom, though, would not go to his sons, or as the NKJV said, to his posterity, okay? Nor would his rule remain. Prophecy says his kingdom would be plucked up and taken over by others. And guess what? That's exactly what happened in history. That's the truth. Alex died at the height of his power in BC 323. And you know what? He left his mentally challenged half-brother, Philip III, and he had a son named Alex IV. They were left in charge of this huge kingdom that Alex had amassed, okay? And these two, the mentally challenged half-brother and the son named Alex, they came under the guidance of a man named Perdiccas or something like that. But guess what? Those three together, they ended up getting murdered, of course. Okay? And what happened then to the power of the kingdom of Greece? Well, it passed into the hands of Alex's 4 generals. And that's what it means in that verse where it says, fulfilling the 4 winds of heaven. Listen, the number 4 in the Bible always means worldwide. It always means, it's every direction, to the north, the south, the east, and the west. It means worldwide. So the 4 winds of heaven is the whole entire, and in that day, Greece had conquered, Alexander the Great, with his kingdom of Greece, conquered the then known world. Okay, yes?
You bring up each time about 33, the age 33. Is there some connection with that?
Well, it's the age when Jesus died at 33 and a half, and Alex died then too, but of utter debauchery. It's a prime.
There's some other times that you could just
Yeah.
kind of something.
Yeah, you know, I can't think of anything extra specific right now, but you know, it just did. Yeah, I know. You know, I kind of tend to think our glorified bodies, you know, will be age around 33 because Jesus died at his prime, you know. So we'll see, you know. I mean, are you guys okay with 33?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
good.
I'm thinking more 23. I had kids starting at 23. 22. 22 then.
Okay, now, so we know that Alexander the Great had 4 generals, and they ended up taking it. Now listen, let's correspond these. The 4 winds that we just read in chapter 11 correspond to the 4 horns that replaced the notable horn when it was broken in the ram and goat vision of Daniel 8. The 4 winds also correspond to the 4 heads on the leopard kingdom of Daniel chapter 7. Now, if you notice the graph I gave you on your outline, I kind of tried to, I made it different colors just so you could see it easier, but let's just go over that really quick. You've got Daniel chapter 2, 7, 8, 11, and then the interpretation, okay? You know what the statue is. All right, the silver portion of the statue represented Persia, right? That was God's point of, or man's point of view. Go to the beast. The beast, it was the bear kingdom for the bear kingdom. So it was the silver kingdom, the bear kingdom, then the ram kingdom, and that was the king of Persia, okay? Under chapter 11, the north and south kings, okay? And then underneath that, under Daniel chapter 2, so the silver kingdom is Persia, and the brass kingdom is Greece. You guys remember that. So the beast kingdoms for the silver was the bear. It was higher on one side, the Medes and the Persians took over more than the Medes. Look underneath there. What was Greece represented from God's point of view? A leopard kingdom, right? And there were 4 heads on that leopard. You can go back and read chapter 7 if you want. Go to the animals, the clean animals. There was the ram and the goat, okay? You had the ram, that represented the Persian kingdom and had 2 horns and one was higher. Okay, that's Persia. But look at the brass kingdom of Greece. That kingdom was the goat, and it had a notable horn. That notable horn was Alex, and when it was broken, 4 horns replaced that notable horn, and those are his 4 generals. Do you see that? Okay, now, then in chapter 11, the north and the south kings, okay, you've got kings of Persia and kings of Greece. Now, the kings of Greece, there's a mighty king, and it ended up divided into 4, but that's basically what the kings of the north and the kings of the south is, okay? We're going to find that. They came out of the Grecian kingdom and the Persian kingdom, and that's what we're going to study, so that you don't have to be thinking about, oh my gosh, it's the north or the south, you know? And just stick with me on this, and it will start making more sense, okay? Let's see, let's go on. Let me go to the next page. All right, I want to do a side note real quick about Josephus. He's the historian, okay? Josephus, the historian, confirms that the book of Daniel was penned by the prophet Daniel himself, as God showed him the things which he was to write. Josephus also documented a really moving incident in the life of Alexander the Great, involving the book of Daniel that's not recorded in the Bible, okay? And this is what it was. Israel was totally filled with fear when they heard that Alex was making his way to Jerusalem. The high priest, his name was Jaddua, and he was in agony, and he was under total terror, not knowing how in the world he should meet the Macedonians. Now remember, at this point in time, Israel, they've come back from Persia, they're in Israel again, right? And they don't have a king, so the high priest would be the one who's in charge. Well, God warned the high priest in a dream that he should take courage and adorn the city, open the gates, and that the rest should appear in white garments. In other words, have everybody put on white, okay? But that he and the priests should meet the king in the habits proper to their order, without any dread of any ill consequences which the providence of God would prevent. So it's recorded that when Alex saw the multitude of Jews at a distance, everyone wearing white garments, and the priests were standing there clothed in fine linen, and the high priest stood out because he had a lot of purple and scarlet clothing, with his mitre on his head and in the thing in his hand, having a golden plate whereupon the name of God was engraved. Alex approached by himself and adored that name and saluted the high priest. And Alexander the Great explained of this act. He said this, he said, I saw this very person in a dream, in this very habit, when I was at Dios in Macedonia, and I believe that I bring this army under the divine conduct and shall therewith conquer Darius. So Alex came into the city, he went up into the temple, and you know what he did? He offered sacrifice to God according to the high priest's direction, and magnificently treated not only the high priest well, but the priests, the Levites as well. Well, you know what they did then? You know what those Jewish priests did? They said, well, we'd like to show you something. So they grabbed the book of Daniel, and they showed him where Daniel declared that there would be one Greek who would destroy the Persian Empire. And guess what? Alex said, I'm that person. He hadn't done it yet. And he says, I'm going to do that. So in other words, the prophecies of Daniel 7 and 8, because that's what he was shown, prophecies of chapter 7 and 8, so impressed Alexander the Great that he became the protector of the Jews throughout his whole realm. So he ended up treating the Jews really good. Isn't that cool? Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so let's go on to Roman numeral 2, the conflicts of the kings of the north and the kings of the south. Let's read. No, not yet. No reading yet. Just listen. This is a really complicated section. So before studying this complicated section, keep in mind that this section gives continuous events of the conflicts. Conflicts between whom? Between the kings of the north, which you're going to find out is Syria, and the kings of the south, which is going to be Egypt. Take out your map that I gave you. Okay, you can kind of familiarize yourself, okay? All of what we're seeing on this map is what came from the death of Alexander the Great. Under Alexander, it's all just the Grecian Empire. That's it, okay? And so in this vision that Daniel is given additional information regarding the kingdoms of Persia and Greece that was not given in Nebuchadnezzar's vision dream or the beast vision of chapter 8. Now, out of all the kingdoms revealed in the book of Daniel, the most information that we get is about the kingdom of Greece. That kingdom divided between the 4 generals. Okay, so remember, you got 4 generals who have taken over all of what Alex conquered. But out of those 4 generals, which each got a geographical area to be in charge of, there are 2 divisions that become the focus and are especially highlighted that become what is known kind of out of the Grecian Empire. Now, what were the 2 main? So there are 4 divisions that we're going to study in a minute, huge 4 divisions, 4 generals. But really, it ends up molding into just 2 divisions, okay? And those 2 divisions are what become the focus for the rest of the book of Daniel, okay? And the 2 divisions are represented with the titles, the kings of the north and the kings of the south. So whenever you're looking at the kings of the north, you're looking at Syria, or what was called Seleucus, or the Seleucids, or Seleucids, or however you want to say that, okay? The kings of the south was Egypt, and they were known as the Ptolemies, all right? That's what ended up coming out of this whole Grecian kingdom. So going forward, these titles become representative titles, moving from king to king over the successive years that will eventually lead to the Roman Empire. So the following verses are really what we're getting ready to read here in a couple minutes. It's almost like as if you were to open a history book and see a list of all the pharaohs in Egypt and what they were known for or what they did. Or of the United States presidents and a quick main point on what each president did. That's really what this is, okay? The problem is it's just so far, history so far back, you read this stuff and you just go, oh my goodness, all right? So verses 5 through 20 give the account of various wars between the kings of the north, represented by the Seleucids, and kings of the south, the Ptolemies, and look who's right in the very middle of the 2. Tiny, tiny little Israel is squished right in between the kings of the north, who are constantly having conflict with whom? Kings of the south. So the reason that Daniel sees these as north and south was because Israel is the center point of God's dealing in the earth. Okay? Syria is north of Israel, Egypt south of her, and so guess what? Israel becomes the battleground between these ongoing warring powers that arose out of the Grecian kingdoms. I want you to always, when you're reading prophecy, I want you to always try to go back and remember from God's point of view. look at that map from God's point of view. Think about it as I'm talking to you. Israel, Judah, Jerusalem, that's center to God. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have their roots there. The nation of Israel has its roots there. The mightiest nations of the earth have fought over that little spot right there. God's tabernacle and temple are centered there, or were centered there. It was the only place on earth where God's glory was made manifest. It's the only place on earth where acceptable sacrifice could be offered to God through his appointed and anointed high priest. It's the only place on earth where God recorded his name. Right in that spot is where prophets of God spoke and wrote prophetic words and inspired revelations. Right there is where messianic prophecy is centered. Here the Messiah, the only begotten Son of God, would be born, live, die, rise again, and ascend back to heaven from there. What else happened at that patch of dirt? The apostolic church was born and had its glorious beginning, right? From Judah and Jerusalem, the gospel of the kingdom would go into all the world. But where did it begin? In Jerusalem. Okay? Here, the nations throughout history of the earth have fought. It is here in the consummation of God's purposes in the earth that the final battle will be fought right there. The end of the age reveals an Antichrist setting up his headquarters in Jerusalem. So what happened in history becomes typical of the oppressions and the treading down periods of the times of the Gentiles, and it's all right there. It all began in Babylon, but it all ends in Jerusalem when the times of the Gentiles are finished. Remember, that's what Daniel's given the information on with all these prophecies. It's about the world kingdoms, the time of the Gentiles. And Israel, tiny little Israel right there, will be the final battleground for the battle of Armageddon. Here the Antichrist armies will fight against Christ and his armies. The 10 kings of the Antichristal kingdom will be destroyed by Christ's second coming. And it will be the final war, and it's all over that tiny, tiny little patch of dirt called the glorious land. And inside that glorious land is the Mount of Olives, where Messiah will return. So you can see from God's point of view, Israel is the center of the earth regarding the purposes of God from which all other directions flow. So what do we have? To its east, Babylon, right? To its north, Syria. To its south, Egypt, and to its west, Greece. Do you get that? So the promised land is literally the battleground of the kings of the north and the kings of the south. So we're going to learn about all these conflicts between the kings of the north and the kings of the south, which ultimately came out of Alex's kingdom, okay? When they're fighting all right there in Israel, okay?
Nanette, you know what I just love to tell it to people say, well, how do you know the Bible's real? Blah, blah, blah. I said, I can't, it would take forever to go through this with you and prove it to you.
Right.
Besides just the prophetic prophecies that have already been fulfilled and are being fulfilled.
Right.
I said, just take a look at the Jews and Jerusalem. Explain to me why that's always at the center of everything.
Right. Yep.
And how the Jews have survived. Why do they want to wipe the Jews out?
Yep.
And people are just like, I never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's obviously something there, and it's all in here.
And you know that more and more by study of the Old Testament, not the New as much, you know?
Yeah.
And so the believers today worldwide who don't really know they're old, they tend to think that the most important place is wherever they are.
Or America,
You know? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, because we're replaced, we're now the chosen nation. No, eyes are still on Israel.
That's right.
Take out this graph before we go on. I want you to see, this will clear up. I think I'm seeing a little confusion. This will clear it up, okay? All right, we're starting. Obviously, you might want to write above this. Did I put your? Oh, you have it. I don't have it.
Yeah,
Can I borrow your pen
Babylonian
a second?
kings.
I should have that. Kings, right? Okay, good. So you guys, thanks. Okay, so you start out. We know what the statue looks like. We're not going to review that. You guys have that down. So you got Babylonian kings. We know that the Medes and Persia took over from Babylon, correct? So you have Medes and Persians, you have the kings. Now, what kings came from there? Well, basically Cyrus through Darius, okay? Or you could say through I could have said through Xerxes, I could have, but underneath that arrow, you see I'm talking about verses 1 and 2 there. So Xerxes hasn't come yet. It's still future. But the point is, it is. Now, follow that line over. That's your Grecian kingdom that is talked about in verses 3 and 4. Okay, it becomes the Grecian kingdom eventually. Over time, it becomes the Grecian kingdom. And who's in charge of the Grecian kingdom? Alexander the Great. He was the first. He's the one who'll do whatever he wants to do. Okay, he dies at the age of 33. His brother, his son, and the person who's watching after him are murdered. And so his whole entire territory that he covered, which is this. Isn't that incredible to think about? Look at from the east to the west, how much area he covered. It's a blowaway. Okay, so now it's divided up into Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander. Okay, so those are the generals. So Ptolemy got south, and Seleucus got east, and Lysimachus received the north, and Cassander received the west. You see that?
Okay.
All right. Now, these 4 divisions end up basically being only 2 divisions, but you still have the same amount of territory, correct? So what happened? Well, Ptolemy, okay, he got south. He became king of the south, and all the kings of the south, and that's that Egypt. So that is where that blue is with the Ptolemies. That all of the kings that we're going to read about, the kings of the south, came from that general, who came out of Alexander's. You get that? Okay, now, then you have these other 3. Guess what? What ended up happening is the kings of the north, Lysimachus had the north, but Seleucus ended up taking over these other 2 guys' territories and blending it pretty much all into one, and that made the kings of the north, which was, excuse me, out of Syria.
Okay, so 2.
So it's 3-1.
Oh, okay.
What I should have done, can I borrow your pen? What I should have done maybe is done this. Look at, ultimately that happened. These 3 ended up coming together to become known as the kings of the north.
Okay.
And the king of the south remained the Ptolemies. What did the north become known as? Lysimachus or Cassander? No, it became known as Seleucus. And that's where we get Syria today.
And so I'm a little confused on the map because I would think this is north, east, south, and west.
Mm-hmm.
Is it different?
No, that's right.
Okay. Well, because,
Okay, so what are you
because
saying?
this is the south.
The
and
Ptolemies,
that's over on
the Ptolemies took the south, so that's down here. You know, it's kind of bummer that they made it blue along with the Mediterranean blue. So here's the Ptolemies.
Oh, there it is down there. Okay.
Sorry, they should have had a different. They should have had it like red or
Yeah,
something.
now I'm seeing where they're pointing. Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what Seleucus did is Seleucus went ahead and he was able to grab those other 2 geographical regions. And he combined it all, so it's 3/4 went to Seleucus, and he becomes basically the beginning of the kings of the north, and Ptolemy remained in the south in Egypt, and all of his line became kings of the south. Do you see that?
Yes.
So who was right in between it all? Notice there, Palestine of Israel. And okay, so why didn't I say Israel? Because I'm saying Palestine for the Middle East region, which obviously inside that is Israel. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, so now think about it like this. Where's my, this is what I want you to kind of see. Let's go with, yeah, let's do it like this. So you've got Babylon, Persia, okay, this is the statue or whatever, Greece, okay, and of course we have Rome that is going to be coming next, okay, so we have all of Daniel, it's going along and it's going along, but what ends up taking most of the information up? right? Persia and Greece, right? Because you got the ram and then you got the goat, right? Now what happens even more so? Out of the goat nation, do you see this? Comes the kings of the north and the kings of the south. Do you see how that did? Now, what's going to eventually come out of that?
Rome.
There you go.
And yet the king of the north
Will be Seleucus.
is the 3 versus the 1 in the
That's
south.
right. He just, he took those other guys' territory pretty much, and he all put it into his territory. That's right. He got 3/4 of the territory of what Alexander conquered, and Ptolemy retained his southern portion. So do you see what I'm trying to say about, now this is what the book of Daniel is. And what is the book of Daniel about? The book of Daniel is about the times of the Gentiles, with one little tiny exception. In the middle, we have the messianic prophecy of 70 weeks that's wedged in there. Do you see what I'm saying? That was chapter 9. Other than that, it's all about the times of the Gentiles. But the messianic prophecy had to be wedged in there because the times of the Gentiles was before and after. So it had to be in there, and it was put in there for that proper timing. So do you see how this all works? It's just kind of trailing down. There was Babylon, Persia, and Greece, and they were going at it. And out of Greece comes the kings of the north and the kings of the south, and over time, Rome is going to come out of it. And Rome's going to last for how long? Rome's going to last a really long time because the legs are the longest. So what I've done is I've taken, kind of, in a sense, I've taken that statue and I've put it on its side, right? Because the legs are now pointing out that way, long, to the very end where we have the Antichristal kingdom, right? With the toes. There's the toes, the 10 toes. Any questions on that? Do you see that? On all of this? Do you get that? All right, so...
And the year of the Roman, the 2,000 years, is the,
church age.
yes, 2030.
Yeah, it's going to be 2,000 years in 2030, and that's that church age, and that's what's going on for so long. But it's still times of the Gentiles, correct? You see how that works? So does that clear it up for you a little bit? You sure? Are there any questions? Because I don't want to go on if there are. You get it? Lisa, you're good? Okay, go ahead.
So what about Italy? Nothing, they're not even in the picture yet. Right?
Not yet. They're going to come out of Rome.
So nobody's conquered them at all. They're
Not yet. No, I mean, that's going to be, Italy is in Rome.
Right.
The Roman Empire. Rome's in Italy.
As little as it is, that's going to take over all of this?
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when you think about, from a spiritual aspect, when you think about the times of the Gentiles, and when you think about the Roman spirit, it's around the world, really, for the most part, right? The spirit of Rome is still with us today, right? And it's now really starting to get back to that terrible beast because, you know, we see the Antichristal kingdom getting ready to be formed here really soon. All right, now go back to this chart, and I just want to show you, we will get there. Ultimately, where does this bad dude named Antiochus Epiphanes come out of? Do you see that? He comes out of the kings of the north, not the kings of the south, okay? And we're going to talk about that probably not this week. In verse 21 of this chapter, he's called the vile person, okay? And then in verses 36 through 45 and into chapter 12, there is this guy called a willful king. Okay, and that's coming out of that kings of the north. Who is that a picture of? Antichrist, right. And in between there, because we're always keeping our eye on Israel, right? In between there was a 1 to 2 year period where a family called the Maccabees were able to get a little bit of freedom, a little bit. Okay, and we have to talk about that. So that's how it really is. So I don't want you to be thinking like, oh man, there's so many different beasts, this, that, and the other. The kings of the north are just what came out of Greece, okay, from the 4 generals. It's either Seleucus or it's Ptolemy, all right? Which now we're going to read all of this stuff. And I mean, if we were to read this out loud right now, 5 to verse 20, you guys would be looking at me and your head would be spinning because there's so much weird history and it sounds like a riddle, right? And really it is. It's a ton of history over so many years because we're talking BC right now, right? So what I have done, I have given you is, can I see, I don't know which page it's on, but what I've done is a brief history of Daniel, page 22, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to read one verse at a time, and what I've done is I found a really quick 1 or 2 sentence commentary of explanation of how that prophecy has been fulfilled in history. Do you see what I'm doing there? And then I gave this to you. It was in my notes, but I thought, you know what? You're keeping a Daniel notebook anyway, so this way you can just kind of compare it up, okay?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Do you get it? Is there any questions so far? I don't want anyone to be confused. We'll go, yeah.
I'm just gonna be a little bit humble, because I'm bad with the Asian and African continents. Is this the 2 continents, or is that?
Yeah, right. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you look right above where, let me get my glasses on. Let me see what that says. I can't read it.
Europe is up.
Okay, do you see where there's a little bit of a black line right,
Yes.
right here? Do you see that? That's the Mediterranean.
Yes. Okay.
And down here, that's Africa.
Yeah.
But Africa obviously goes over further. It goes over further. We know that the continent goes over further.
Yeah, right.
But this is the land that was amassed.
So that's the African continent.
It is the African continent, and so over here you've got Asia Minor, right, where the East meets the West, and all of that kind of stuff. And so then you've got Asia over here, and then you've got what we know as Europe over here, up in
Okay.
here. Okay.
Okay, so it's all, this is a
Because
map.
look at go to the boot. That's Italy. That's Italy. So you
Where's the
can
boot?
see there's and see the green.
Oh, the green's, oh,
You
yeah.
see the green? That's
So
Greece.
Europe.
That's Greece. So it's Europe, and then you get right over into where the East meets the West. From Asia Minor, you come.
And this is the Asian
Right.
continent.
And so I know it was the best colored map I could get for us off this. I wish they would have made the Mediterranean a different color. Right above the O in Ptolemy's, you'll see an M-I-T-T. Do you see that? It's in white.
Yeah, it's right there.
Look above, see P-T-O
Yeah.
on Ptolemy? Now look really tiny. There's an M-I-T-T
Oh.
or M-I-D-D. It's
Oh, yeah,
Mediterranean.
It's kind of hid behind the.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Mediterranean.
Okay, got it.
There's gonna be a geography test out.
Yeah,
right?
I just have to, I try to visualize it, and I always forget how they're all connected.
Yeah.
Kind of like North and South America.
Right.
We're all connected.
Right.
But we live here, so we
Right.
know.
So you know that.
We live on this continent, but I always forget that. And then of course you got Australians separated over here and.
Exactly.
Whatever.
I love maps. I'm always, I have
I love
maps
maps
up
too.
in
It's
my
been a long
garage,
time.
so I'm always looking at them, especially.
Interesting is when you're in the southern tip of Spain, you can see Morocco.
Right.
Oh, which is African continent.
Right.
14 kilometers.
The
just
Rock
on
of
the other
Gibraltar.
side, and
You can just see it. It's right
all
there.
the lights on the other side.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool.
It's
I want to see
Yeah.
that. One day we will.
Yeah, exactly. So remember, keep in mind, Dee Dee, that even though, yes, those are the continents, this is what Alexander amassed.
Right, that's what my brain was.
Now,
going, like,
that's
oh,
the thing. If you really go back, maybe, and like later on, look up on your Google what the Medes and Persians had, and then look at Babylon, and you see what Alex did, you're just like, oh, how did he do that? That was incredible.
And then control them. Like
And
that.
control it like that. It was
Fear.
incredible. Yeah, exactly.
See what
You
I
know?
say.
So, all right, did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay,
I'm
no
sorry,
problem.
I kind of got
No.
off track, but I just have
No,
to.
I
I'm a
want you to know
visual
that.
learner, and
Yeah.
I'd like to.
No, I know. That's why I did all these papers for you, because I know it helps me. I have to. I'm
Yeah,
always
yeah.
looking
I
at when I'm
literally have to see
studying.
it, yeah.
Okay. So, any other questions before we go on?
No, we're,
No.
we're starting on 22.
So now go to verse 5. 22. Where are you? 22.
Page 22, yeah. The
Mhm.
brief
So
description.
we are under Roman numeral 2, and we are under letter A, kings of the south and kings of the north. And that covers verses 5 through 20, okay? You see that on our outline? Okay, so let's grab our Bibles, and then I'm going to read off my notes, and you'll see that that's my notes right there, okay? All right, so verse 5 of chapter 11, okay? Also, okay, so it starts out, this is so confusing to me. Also, the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. All right, so go to verse 5 on your brief history. Ptolemy was Alex's first general to gain control of the southern portion of the kingdom. So he was the first king of the south, which is Egypt, okay? You get that? All right. One of his princes named Seleucus Nicator, he went west to Babylon and founded the kingdom of Syria, taking territories of former general Cassander and Lysimachus. Do you see how that happened? So the guy, Seleucus, actually ended up coming out of the south, out of Ptolemy. You see that? One of his princes.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, you get that?
Yep, because he was
Okay.
in the east here on your thing, but then he went west.
Yeah,
He originally came out of
That's
the south.
right. Okay, so now you're seeing how it developed. All right, let's read verse 6 in the Bible. And at the end of some years, they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. Do you see why I did this now?
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? All right, let's read. All right. After years of war, the two kingdoms, the north and the south, attempted peace by means of marriage. Bernice, daughter of Ptolemy II, to Antiochus II, king of Syria, who rid his first wife, Laodice, for this purpose, and it was a fail. What did Laodice do? Well, she went back and she murdered her husband, and she poisoned Bernice along with her offspring. And Laodice set her own son, Seleucus II, on the throne. It's a real drama here, okay? Okay, good.
Is there
This
a
is,
movie about this?
yeah, what probably
Some, we've seen
could,
some,
yeah.
right? Little pieces of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so let's keep going. Now do you see why I did this and gave this to you? Because it's just, there's no way to really understand it. All right, verse 7. But from a branch of her roots, one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. All right, so go back to your commentary. A relative of Bernice attacks Syria. Well, Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, who is now king of Egypt, invades the north to avenge his sister's death. Okay, that's what basically happened. All right, go to verse 8. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Okay, so go over to your commentary. Ptolemy carried off much plunder with many slaves of Syria, and he did indeed take silver, gold, idol, and vessels. The conflict then ceased for some years. So
Okay.
everything God has said,
Right.
the commentary is actual history, okay?
Okay, so this is where it was prophesied.
That's right.
And this is where we're finding out what happened in
That's
history.
it.
That's been
Exactly, in simple language.
Okay, good.
Okay, verse 9. And also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. Okay, so go to verse 9. Egypt was invaded by Seleucus II, but little came of it. He returned home with nothing. Ptolemy lived 5 years after the death of Seleucus II of Syria. Okay, all right, go to verse 10. However, his sons shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. Okay, so go over to your commentary, and this is what happened in history. The two sons of Seleucus II did assemble a great army, and they go to the borders of Egypt. Now, Ptolemy Epiphanes wins that battle. Thousands were killed and thousands were enslaved. Okay, so that's what happened then. All right, now go to verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude. But the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. All right, so go to verse 11. Ptolemy Philopater, king of Egypt, was aroused to anger. He rose to meet the challenge, and guess what? He ended up defeating Antiochus III of Syria. Okay, So now go to verse 12. When he was taken away, the multitude, his heart, when he was taken away, when he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. All right, go over to 12. Tremendous battle ensued between the two. All right, now go back to 13. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Okay, go over to 13. It says, after 14 years of progress in the north and decay in the south, Antiochus of Syria makes another invasion of Egypt, and he defeats Ptolemy V. Okay, so everything God is prophesying here, it's just coming true. Okay, there's obviously a lot more detail to all of these conflicts, but I'm not interested. Okay, 14. Now in those times, many shall rise up against the king of the south. Also violent men of your people. Now Daniel's being talked to, so that means Israelites. Also violent men of your people, the Jews, shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. Okay, go to verse 14 and see what it says. There were general revolts against Egypt. Some seditious Jews apostatized from God, and their obligations to Egypt joined with Antiochus. The Jews tried to enforce the vision of Daniel by scheme, but it failed. Okay, so it said that. God said that that's what was going to happen, and that's what happened. Okay, let's go to verse 15. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. All right, so verse 15. The king of south weakens, and Antiochus III wins the battle of Peneus. He drove the Egyptians out of Palestine, the well-fortified city of Sidon, Egypt's most prized stronghold. Now, if you look at your map, you will see around Israel a blue border. That was Egypt's border. And they were making Israel pay tribute to them. So that's what that's talking about. They were able to get through on the borders there. Okay? All right. Let's go to verse 16. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. Okay, go to verse 16 on your commentary. Antiochus III, also known as the Great, swept southward against Ptolemy in Egypt and was welcomed in the Holy Land, Israel. Antiochus did his own will, but he had in mind the apostatization of the Jews. He occupies Palestine. Okay, all right, go on to verse 17. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. All right, verse 17. Antiochus the Great renews his conquest with great success. Antiochus and Ptolemy come to terms, and Antiochus gives his daughter Cleopatra to marry Ptolemy, a young man in years. But instead of Cleopatra helping her father, she turns against him and helps Ptolemy V, the young man. Okay? All right, so exactly what God just said was going to happen did. All right, verse 18. And after this, he shall turn his face to the coastlands and shall take many. But a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. All right, well, in revenge, Antiochus turns his conquests against the isles of the Mediterranean Sea and seized many of them. Strong resistance from a Roman general, so Rome is just now starting to come into a little bit of an existence now. Scipio Asiaticus rebuked the indignity of Antiochus, and he flipped it back on his arrogant head. Okay, so now something's starting to happen different with Rome. Okay, verse 19. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. All right, Antiochus fled from one fortress to another. He was brought to a halt and put under heavy terms of tribute. In his attempt to plunder a temple, he was killed in BC 187. Okay, all right, let's go to verse 20. There shall rise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. Okay, go to verse 20. This was Antiochus' son, Seleucus IV Philopater. He reigned from BC 187 to 176. He was called a raiser of taxes because Rome compelled him to pay yearly taxes. In his endeavor to raise taxes, he sent his man Heliodorus to plunder the holy temple in Jerusalem. You can read about that in 2 Maccabees chapter 3 in the Apocrypha. Heliodorus was unsuccessful, and he was eventually was eventually assassinated. What does yours say there? He was eventually assassinated by Heliodorus. Yes, it was he. Okay. All right.
No, that doesn't make sense. Heliodorus was unsuccessful. He was eventually assassinated by
Oh, yeah. Antiochus was eventually assassinated by Heliodorus,
Okay.
the raiser of taxes. Sorry. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Antiochus' son?
The other one that's,
Seleucus?
yep.
Right.
Yep.
Seleucus the fourth. Yes. Okay. All right. Now, let's see. If you want, what we can do is we could stop here. As you can see with your 6 pages that I gave you, there's a whole nother section where we're going to do this again, where I'm going to do the comments. But there's a lot that I want to talk about the vile person. That's Antiochus Epiphanes. And there's a lot about him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to shove it in 10 minutes. I want to take our time with that. So why don't we call it right there for tonight, okay? And, if you can, just kind of refresh and look over some of this stuff. Again, mostly, I want you to remember, I want you to remember that the book of Daniel is about what? Okay, that's really good. What is it about? But when you really look at the whole entire book of Daniel, and you get all the prophecies for the most part, especially the part about Messiah, it brings us up to where? Pretty much it brings us up to Messiah's first advent, right? The times of the Gentiles are still going with Rome for 2,000 years, right? All right. Where do the times of the Gentiles pick up again later on? In the book of Revelation. That's why we're going to continue then on. You have to know Daniel before you can understand Revelation. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Keep your binders, because before we do Revelation, I got to go over some tabernacle stuff. You don't understand Revelation unless you understand the tabernacle. And I'm hoping you guys will keep it all together. Daniel, tabernacle, Revelation. Okay? All right. Thank you, Lord. Please seal this in our hearts.